Tonight we'll begin by reminding ourselves of why we're here and what we're doing here and how we began last month. We need to always say that we belong to a tradition that is grounded in and founded in prophetic experience. That's for millennia. The Abrahamic faiths have been privileging the prophetic voice, the voice of the divine speaking through human beings in this world. And by definition, that means it's been honoring mystical experience from the very beginning. That there have been these experiences that humans have of the divine voice, the divine visage, being carried beyond themselves, but often being met right in the middle of their daily life with this sense of presence that steps out of the unknown into their common world. So that sense of things is at the heart. And we often forget that in the press of our daily lives, that no, we belong to that. That's at the foundations. Out of that experience of our spiritual ancestors was the summons to step into that world. We've been called to participate, not just to observe or just to enjoy what they experienced from afar, but to actually step into that experience, to relive it ourselves. And one of the ideas is that if we hang out with those that have this sense of the mysteries, that it affects us, that it begins to change our own consciousness. It begins to change the way we perceive. So by hanging out with the mystics, we're catalyzing our own consciousness. And that's why we called this Wisdom's Journey through the eyes of the mystics, and we chose 4. So we were going to get close to their mystical experience. We were going to attempt to see through their eyes, to experience their vision, to enter in and let that be a catalytic experience for us, to ignite something inside of us. And you're listening to this and you're saying, oh yeah, sure. Maybe, or wouldn't that be wonderful if? But the tradition basically invites us into the space of spirit where this is a possibility. And it says that in ordinary experience, ordinary human beings can be catalyzed. Their consciousness can be changed by mystical exposure. So it's very clear that we're, as a group of folk on the planet, at a tipping point. We couldn't be more clear even just today that we're at this moment of, we don't know where things are going to go. There's been a conversation among a group of us today wondering if we're on the edge of civil war. And, you know, several years ago that was brought up and it was, no, that's just too far of a reach. But we're at a crossroads. We're at a crisis point. It's very clear that our society is facing an edge, and we don't know what's beyond that edge. You could say that we're in emergency. That you might even think of this as triage, an emergency room. So the society that we're living in is in an emergency room. And the fact is that if we can't get out of this, if we can't tip over into some other form of consciousness, we're not going to make it. Human consciousness seems to be pretty locked in. It desperately needs this kind of shift. It needs the catalytic shift. the very thing that the prophetic tradition talks about, and envisions that human beings could be pushed over, maybe through crisis, maybe through emergency, into another state of consciousness collectively. But there have to be those individuals in society that are sites where this begins to show up, where it begins to be manifest. And perhaps it's catching. And the prophetic tradition looked ahead and said, this is something that's going to happen to humankind, that their consciousness is going to change. We've mentioned it before. The passage in the little book of Joel says, in those latter days, I will pour out my spirit. And this will begin to change human consciousness, visions and dreams and seeings, things of that nature. Well, the mystics all along the way have been those individuals who were evidences that this was true, that humans could actually step into that space. They could actually be a site where revelation occurred, where the power of extraordinary seeing could actually enter into this world and begin to shift and catalyze human consciousness. Is that possible? Could we be such sites? Is it not the reason that we're drawn to this topic because some impressive spirit is on us, pushing us forward, inviting us in? And that's the purpose of our work this weekend, is to see if what Yeshua said about, I will give you my same spirit, is that possible? How is that possible? When it occurred in the lives of the mystics, what did they say about that? What was their consciousness like? So we're going to explore that this weekend with an extraordinary woman saint, and many of you have already, I'm sure, explored some of her works. Hildegard of Bingen, an amazing woman of extraordinary capacities and powers, and we're going to look very carefully at what her experience was like. So we have been called into another form of consciousness that was said by Yeshua to be transformative, and who said, I will bring you, I will carry you into that, I will open the door for that for you. So let me go through a series of images that we used last time just to kind of catch us up and think about what that might mean. And I'm going to move to what I would hope to be tonight, a place where you could say, yes, I could see that that's possible, even in my own experience, even in my own life. That's what we want to get to. So let me go through these images just to remind ourselves of where we were and how we got to where we are tonight. And I'm going to just step through sort of quickly these images that were used last time to say that we're in a journey through space and time together, where we're being called beyond our norm into other possibilities. This has always been the sense that we were being ministered to by heaven itself in order for that kind of catalytic change to happen. So this is an image of the icon of the Abrahamic traditions of Gabriel, the messenger Gabriel, bringing down to us from transcendent spaces what we needed to hear and what we needed to know. So the Abrahamic faiths have always spoken of this particular archangel of revelation, but not just to the prophets, because Yeshua is basically saying, I'm going to give that to you. So this is another image of Gabriel in a in another sense of holding us in a certain sense next to the heart of the revelation. So this sphere of the human world is being held by Gabriel, and he is the transmitter. And when this begins, it's an invitation. When Gabriel and perhaps two of his cohorts arrive at the home of Abraham and Sarah, there is a kind of movement of conversation. And this image of the icon of the love of the stranger, it's called in the tradition, where we welcome the stranger and we welcome revelation, we welcome it into our life. So the prophetic vision starts among a group of very unlikely characters. Some of them nomadic in the extreme. Their stories are just astounding. They were not easy people. But the tradition continues where the revelation is being given and people are being affected by it. And then the visionary tradition of the prophets begins. So not only does Gabriel come and meet us where we are on earth, Gabriel lifts us into other space. So the idea that we could participate in our conscious awareness with visionary experience. And this is continued down through the ages. This happens to be an image of Julian of Norwich, who preceded, I'm almost positive, preceded Hildegard of Bingen, with her visions of seeing the world and seeing the palm of her hand and saying, oh, this is good. This is going to be very good. All shall be well. Even in the midst of the tragic that we're experiencing, all shall be well. And so this is an invitation for us in our own consciousness to begin to participate, to begin to experiment. So we go back to Yeshua's teaching where he says, all right, this begins as a search. It leads to findings where the Spirit will help us find things, but that will inevitably cause difficulty for us. So trouble always succeeds finding. If we stay with it, we are led then into wonder. So wonder is that moment where out of our ordinary experience of searching, finding, and even having trouble, we are given extraordinary insight. We're given extraordinary vision. And then we tend to, spend a lot of time with the trouble that we have, but this is an invitation to move onward into waiting before the revelation of the divine to each of us. And then we take that revelation and we begin to experience it as a normative sovereignty, which eventually leads then to a new state of rest. And rest means to dwell in another form of consciousness. So this is the 6 states of the journey that seems to occur over and over again. We tend to work with these 3 and miss the progression of these last 3. And that's why this particular work that we're doing is focusing on visionary experience, mystical consciousness, and then how to live with that, and then to bring our own experience into a new station of rest, of consciousness. So sovereignty is normative for older beings. So I would put most of us listening tonight having reached the state of sovereign consciousness, meaning that we're relatively established and balanced, and we're pretty sure of who we are and where we are in the world. That's sovereign consciousness. But the invitation is to move beyond it into the next level of mystical consciousness, which has always been a part of the Abrahamic faiths, to step into that form. And then ultimately into the consciousness of the divine, or to participate in divine consciousness, which is a high state indeed, but not extraordinary. And when we read the mystics, they went from sovereignty to mystical into cosmic consciousness, or Christ consciousness, as it is called. So we're given the opportunity. It's a gift. And our little candle that we tend to see, my little candle with its light, does that mean much? But the tradition says, yes, it means a lot. It means a great deal. And we begin to then practice that as a contemplative experience. We give more and more opportunity for that to occur inside of our experience. And this then opens up channels inside of the deep core of our being, the cardial center, which allows that consciousness to come in. And it's in that place that we are told, where the heart dwells with the divine heart, that we are given the capacity to see, to be caught up into the divine seeing, into visionary experience. And that begins to affect our own personal consciousness. And we're not, in our tradition, we're asked not to be satisfied with the state that we're in, but to press forward, to, like that first image, the caravan, together to move forward, that this is a journey of moving forward. And even though we may feel stuck, it's an invitation to move in our consciousness forward into these states, to begin to touch the cosmic, to begin to touch the mind of the divine, to allow something else in, even in the ordinary world, so that the natural world and the transcendent world begin to work together in a particular way, so that we can begin in our own world to work with the world in a different way, to let heaven and earth touch us on the inside. Is that possible? That's what we're exploring. Is that possible? The mystics say yes. Yeshua said yes. So what was it? So what was the experience? What would happen if we began to work then in a sovereign way? This might be another image of sovereignty. We're working both with time and space from out of a different form of consciousness. And, it doesn't look good for us. But if there is some catalytic possibility, then we're going somewhere. Then humans can begin to experience something outside the norm, outside of their narcissistic egocentricity. And we're just caught in it. Is it possible to move beyond it? Is this wisdom's journey possible? The tradition says yes, that we could become ourselves a site where that could enter into our own experience. And we could begin to see. So we started with Rumi last time, and Rumi, out of his terrible situation, he was born and raised and lived in one of the most apocalyptic moments in at least Middle Eastern history. And out of that came his extraordinary seeing, his extraordinary vision. And he was mentored by another mystic, Shamsa Tabrizi. Shamsa Tabrizi was just this fiery being who catalyzed Rumi and catalyzed his consciousness. So in that century, in the 9th century, 9th, 10th century, around the time of the Mongol invasion, this happened to Rumi, and he begins to speak of his extraordinary visions. So we took his visions and we began to see through his eyes what he saw about us. And remember the vision of the ocean and ourselves being foam, very impermanent beings we are. And the divine seeing that and yet working with it, working with each individual and actually calling them out of their individuality, their little bubble is the way Rumi sees it. And the bubble pops, and the hawk seizes the soul and carries it forward, carries it up. That's the vision of Rumi. So we spent a lot of time thinking about that last time. And this is an image of Hafez, and we used, I think, one of Hafez's, again, extraordinary poems about the ordinary person whose soul is turned into wine. So that's the beauty. And this was the world that we were working with last time. And it was out of Northeast Asia that the Mongols came and swept down and changed everything. And yet the vision persisted and flared in the midst of that. And we talked about a little bit about that and what happened in the experience of Molana was his name, and how that appeared to Rumi. So in our own world, in our own place, even where we are now, where it's very, very dark, could this be the time? Could this be the moment when this extraordinary possibility begins to show itself? So you are the universe expressing itself as a human for a little while. Or you are an eternal creature having a temporal experience. Now, is that true? Can we begin to work on that possibility? Is it possible for us to begin to think of ourselves as an eternal creature sent into time to have exactly this experience, to have awakening, to have consciousness being changed? I think the answer is yes. Let me see where I am. Okay, that's Hildegard. We're going to come to her tomorrow, and I'm going to just for the moment get out of this particular spot and let us talk to each other face to face. And so I want to, that's what we did. That's sort of how we went, just to remind ourselves and what's at stake and why this wisdom journey takes us into association with the mystics, because it's believed that they're catalytic. It's seen that they are catalytic, that they will have a catalytic effect upon us. So if we're actually meant for this, we're actually designed for this, the question is, how do we begin to think about it? How do we begin to respond to the invitation? And what happens when we do? One of the beautiful poems of Rumi says, the divine says to us in pre-eternity, we're eternal creatures coming into time, go, have an experience of the world. Go into the world and have that experience. And it's a kind of push that humans would actually struggle in this space that we're in, and even in this extraordinary time that we're in. Go and have that experience. So let's think about going somewhere and having an extraordinary experience. Most of us are traveled, world travelers. I think probably everyone that I'm looking at has stepped outside their normal boundaries and said, all right, I'm going to go. I'm going to go somewhere different. I'm going to go someplace extraordinary. I'm going to step outside the norm. I'm going to expose myself to experiences that the average person wouldn't be having. So let's say you decide, okay, I'm going to go to Italy, and I'm going to experience Tuscany, and I'm going to just step outside my normal zone, and I'm going to put myself inside of this extraordinary possibility of visiting Italy. Now, you know what it's like to go someplace and sort of zone out, where you kind of, it becomes a blur, and it turns out that you're in this extraordinary space, but it's just kind of, it's almost overwhelming. It's coming at you so fast that what you tend to do is sleepwalk through the experience. You're having the experience of Italy, but then you sort of, it's just too much, or something, you need something else to help you catalyze it. So to keep it from being sleepwalking through Italy and having what you might say an in-depth experience of Italy. So let's imagine that that's true of coming into this world. The divine says, go have an experience. You're an eternal creature. Have an experience of the temporal world. And most human beings, ourselves included, very, very quickly go to sleep. It's just almost too much. We're sleepwalking through, we can't remember. And if you've been on a vacation, you say, what did you do 2 days ago? I don't know, I can't remember. And what that says is you're on automatic pilot. And it's sometimes a way of protecting yourself from too much sensory overload. And so you put it on in neutral, and you allow yourself to just sort of be pushed by the guides or by the, just the tour, and you just kind of go through the events, and you fall into bed that night, and you ask yourself, well, what did I experience? And it's sometimes in that sleepwalking mode, even though you're having an extraordinary experience in Italy or some other country, you're still sleepwalking. And not having what you might call an in-depth encounter with the other. Now, by definition, Italy should give you plenty of otherness, of extraordinary possibility. And what does it take to catalyze that? And I've thought about that a lot, because when I've traveled, I've realized I can either go through sleepwalking and get overloaded, or I can have an in-depth, life-changing encounter. Now, it doesn't happen all the time, but remember the first image that I showed you tonight, this is a pilgrimage. So we're on pilgrimage, and it can be overload, or we can be met by spirit in such a way that it electrifies our experience or raises it into a new way of seeing. I'm going to give you an example. A group of us, some of the folk are here in this group, went to the Middle East, from Lebanon to Syria, from Syria to Jordan, from Jordan to Israel, back to Jordan, and then we left. And it was a life-changing experience for a lot of different reasons. But one of the most catalyzing, and this was, and I was determined, and I was sort of a semi-guide. I wasn't the Syrian guide. When we were in Syria, we had a lovely Syrian guide that knew things more than I did, but I was determined that we would have, I wanted us to have something outside of the ordinary. Okay, go to this mosque, go to that, go see the souk, go here, go there, busy, have a nice day, fill it up, have some good food, and that would be it. I was hoping for this, and indeed it happened. And I sort of set it up that we would go to the shrine of our last mystic, the one that we're going to study in 3 sessions, Ibn al-Arabi. He died in Damascus. I knew he had died there, and I knew his tomb was there. I didn't know where it was, but as soon as I got to Damascus, I inquired, and I said, "Where's the tomb of Ibn al-Arabi?" And I was told by our guide, and I said, "We are going to go there. We must go there." And he set it up, and it was in a mosque, in a sort of outlying part of Damascus, up on a hillside, an ordinary mosque, meaning it didn't have a lot of flash and flare, except that it had in its basement the shrine of Ibn al-Arabi. I didn't know for sure what would happen, but it was one of those times when we were lifted out of our own ordinary selves. So we waited for the evening prayer to finish. We didn't go in. We arrived in the middle of evening prayer, and the congregation was praying in the mosque. So we sat outside and waited for them to come out. When they came out, we said, "We want to see the shrine," and they all went with us down to the tomb of Ibn al-Arabi. And then the extraordinary experience commenced. And to this day, I can hardly talk about it because it was so extraordinary. Because what happened at the end of that is we called the leader of the Sufi gathering there and said, "Would you chant the Dhikr for us, the invocation for us?" And they said, "Yes, and you join us." So we all joined in the invocation. And Muslims and Christians, hand in hand. It was a mystical experience for all of us. And we left arm in arm. And Damascus will never be the same. I will never be the same. I'm always affected by that experience. Every time I return to it, I realized we were lifted out of ourselves. We had this beyond the ordinary. And it was because of, I think, Ibn al-Arabi that we're going to look at was there. I think he called us. I think we were in, and the barriers between Muslims and Christians totally disappeared. Totally disappeared. And we were one group. We were one body of and it was a mystical experience. And it's difficult to describe, but we were all affected. We all sort of went out of that experience stunned. So we were no longer sleepwalking. And that's what I think the 4th position in Yeshua's circle is about, is wonder. It was wonderful, and it was exactly that. And we had an encounter with spirit. We had an encounter with the mystic. We had an encounter with each other. We were lifted beyond our normal cultural boundaries. And that's what I think exposure to the mystics means and what it's about. So when the mystics step into our experience and we give them a space, we let them be a messenger. We let Gabriel's revelations flow into us. Then we're no longer sleepwalking. And we're moving in the way that the prophetic tradition wants us to move. Out of trouble into wonder, out of wonder into a station of sovereignty, meaning that we begin to build on that in ordinary life in such a way that it changes ordinary life. We're no longer what we were. Tonight at supper, in the candlelight, Joanne and Allison and I were talking, and Allison was sharing. She said, looking back over on her in her life, you don't know this about her, but she started as a Marxist. Well, she's no longer a Marxist. She's still a witch, but she's not a Marxist. And so what's interesting about that is that there's the indication that the mysteries begin to affect our ordinary lives in just such an extraordinary way if we let wonder arrive. And you can't predict it and you can't command it, but you can stay open to it and allow it a space. So every time we come to the mystics, we say, well, how is the space open for you? What happened? Well, for Rumi, it was getting chased out of his home by the Mongols and then finally having to, he was a total a migrant, ended up in Turkey, today's Turkey, and met mystics along the way that catalyzed his experience until finally Shamsa Tabrizi altered his consciousness. So that's the exposure to the mysteries, to the prophetic tradition. And that's why this journey on the weekend is an attempt to put ourselves close into their proximity. So I'm going to stop this now and give you because we're going to change the venue in just a little bit to do something brand new. But I'd like to just, for the next 5 minutes or so, anything that I've said so far raises issues, concerns, questions. Let's just give ourselves a little bit of time to talk to each other.
Lynn, you're a little bit wonky in your signal.
Okay.
So you may have to have you turn off your camera. I think we're managing okay, but just to let you know, there's a little bit of and so if people would use the raise hand feature, which is at the bottom of your screen, that would help, makes it easier for us to see you.
We wouldn't be in this group if we didn't already have affinity and attraction to this. So I want to say that right off. Catherine, and then Jerry.
I've been thinking about the experience that you just described and the whole experience of moving into sovereignty. And I wonder what you would say about that when something happens, like happened in that space in that period of time space in Damascus, that surely must affect more than just the people who were present. Does it?
I would think it did, but I wouldn't know. I mean, I don't know how to even assess that. But I know it really changed all of us. We were very, very different after that, I think, and we were very much more attuned. And I know that it affected the Syrians.
Well, then maybe each of you came into your world in a different way that changed telephone texts, that changed. That's just what I'm musing about right now. So
yeah, and I think we ought to think, I mean, that is the catalytic effect, the ripple effect. I think that's true. And if that is true, then that means there's hope for this world. So Jerry, and then Sally. Jerry, you are muted.
I had sort of a similar experience at Rumi's tomb. And I couldn't speak with the ladies surrounding me, but there was a closeness that was very, very rare. And while we were still in the town there, we were doing Eastern yoga, 2 Christians doing Eastern yoga, looking across the tops of about 7 mosques. And that whole experience just interwoven the connections that we all have, that we're never separated from this. It's always, always there. So
Yeah.
thank you, Lynn, for presenting this series for us.
Well, here's the thing. I think it's like a sinew strengthening. It's not the whole ball of wax, but something is strengthened. Some new avenue is being created. Every time we expose ourselves to the Abrahamic faith in this way, that's strengthened. I'm sure of it.
Did you call on me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, going back to both your and Catherine's point, I am a firm believer that the energy that we build as a community, say in your instance, in several instances when we were all together in India, adds to the energy of the place, which means that the next group that comes in not only experiences our energy, but then they add to the experience of the place. So it continually changes and increases and forms energy points in the world. But I think that's why, you go into an important monastery, you go into an important cathedral, and you have this sense of awe. And it's not because of the gold and the bricks and the architecture, although that's amazing. It's because so many people have found it so inspiring and added that energy to that place, and that energy stays there. And so you feel that, and then you add to it.
Right.
So it can't help but catalyze everyone. So.
It's synergistic. It certainly called out of us our best, to be, in their space and to honor their space in the right way. And I knew something about how to do that, but it called out of all of us something that was different. And then we left different. We left very different from when we went in. So, Allison, are you queuing up the video?
I've queued it up. Yeah,
Okay.
It's better to have it come from me rather than you.
Yes, from me. So I'm going to give, unless there's other questions, I want to set this up. So I was thinking about, all of us are a community of believers. I hate to use the word sort of, but meaning we're not doubting this necessarily, except there is the sense often of, well, is this hyperbole? Is this truly available? How do you think about this? And I realize that, and it's an unspoken issue for all of us. Maybe it's not possible for me, or maybe it's someone else, or it's so rare that I shouldn't even contemplate consciousness working in this particular way. But I keep reminding us that if we don't do this, if humanity can't do this, we're going to die. It's very clear we're going to die. I mean, society is not looking very good. It's not looking like we can make it, given all so something has to change. And it's really clear that the consciousness that most people are living with are either sort of the ordinary, let's get by as well as we can, but we just try to stumble forward as best we can. And then we have a whole group of members of our society that would love to tear it down and take everything with it. So the question is, how do we begin to teach each other and ourselves and our world about the nature of our own consciousness? And I came across this. I've always liked Deepak Chopra. I'm not a devotee, but every once in a while I will see something that he has done and really enjoy it. And I've read a number of his books. I think he's grown as an individual, and I think he's done some very good work. But it's a 10-minute clip, and I just was so happy that I saw it in preparation for tonight, because he represents what's possible and puts it in a way that I think can make every one of us stop and think, okay, I need to think about it this way. So we're going to look at it. I'm not sure that we don't need to see it twice, but we're going to see it once for sure. So watch it, just listen, follow his argument. When we're done, I'm going to ask you just to scribble down the most salient aspects of what you heard and what kind of a impact does it have on you. And then we're going to go into groups and let you talk about it with each other, see what comes out of it, because I think it's the foundation for understanding what mystical consciousness is all about for everyone. So with that in mind, let's watch Deepak Chopra. You're right. Thank you. Deepak Chopra very simply puts you in mystic space. Instead of thinking of it as something will come to me. No. You're coming out of it this very moment. So take a moment, write down what you heard, and we're going to send you to talk to each other. So for the next minute or two, just make some notes. So last night, what we did was to kind of recover our beginning of the month before and think again what we're about in this weekend. And it's a journey of a sapiential journey of wisdom through the eyes and the seeing of mystical consciousness. And I made the case that what this does is affect our own consciousness. When we expose our own consciousness to higher vision, higher frequency, even in consciousness, it changes our own. And then I introduced, and we talked about, and we had some time to reflect on a very interesting way of thinking about consciousness that Deepak Chopra spoke about in I thought, a beautiful analog of consciousness and its avatar. So that it's almost the reverse way of thinking, that we begin to perceive that we live in a sea of consciousness that's beyond space and time, but that our own physical being as a kind of avatar allows that consciousness to be channeled into the world that we're inhabiting at this moment. And so we all have access to that. In fact, we wouldn't be sitting here talking if we didn't have that cosmic flow of consciousness, which is sourced in the divine flowing through us. So we typically think of the development of consciousness from the lowest levels up, but what Deepak Chopra was saying, let's reverse that and think that what is actually occurring is this grand ocean of consciousness, is the sea in which we live. And then that begins to be channeled down into our own being, which is the receptor or the avatar of that. And that avatar grows. Consciousness is not growing. The avatar is growing. And once we reach a place in our own developmental understanding and our own developmental being, our evolution, where we move through the normative states of childhood, adolescence, and adulthood, and then we are established in an adult world, we have the opportunity, and we are all in a station of sovereignty. The word is really an interesting one, which says inside of us has developed a kind of confidence and competence. We're no longer as afraid as we once were. We're no longer as vulnerable. We're strengthened. And it's inside of sovereignty that this power of seeing comes. So mystical consciousness is more readily available, and it's just behind us. And we allow that to stream through. So, and then that streaming is unique to each one of us. We get to shape it and we get to play in that field. And it's not like it's far off. We're swimming in it. But our being, our avatar being, has become more and more permeable, more and more competent to receive that light, that frequency of light. So it's a wonderful way of thinking. And I really think it's going to be advantageous for us to think of it that way. So that was last night, and it's something to ponder. It's something to reflect on, and it's an opportunity for us to perhaps reverse the sense that, oh, mystical consciousness is, something that's not inside of our purview, but that's not true. It's not true. So now we're exposing our own being to this streaming, and we're beginning to explore how to live as sovereign beings with that opportunity. And the fact is that it looks like the majority of humankind is stuck in adolescent consciousness, and it's pretty devastating, and it's wreaking havoc. And we may not survive the stuckness as a species, so that we're at a crisis point. And to be talking about this is not just some sort of trivial pursuit. It may be the key to everything. And we're the carriers of the key. We're the carriers, the keys of the kingdom. This is the divine sovereignty. So that's why we're here. And it's why it's so interesting and important. So today, we're going to enter into another mystical space, a space of consciousness that was held beautifully by this woman of the High Middle Ages, Hildegard of Bingen, and she's absolutely an astounding soul. So we'll get to her in just a little bit. But I want to set up a way of thinking that may help you understand her and why you may be attracted to a particular saint or a particular soul that is manifesting this form of consciousness. Let's talk about ecological zones. You realize across any geographic space there are ecological zones that kind of are habitats in which certain things are possible, but some things are excluded. So if you're in an ecological zone that is jungle, you'll have orchids in bloom in that ecological zone, but you won't have cactus in bloom. You need to go to the desert, the high desert, the Mojave Desert, the Sonora Desert, where you will have this extraordinary ecology, where you have zones of aridity and yet this great abundance of life. So every zone has a realm of possibility. Let's imagine that we could think of that in terms of spiritual ecology. Or let's think of families of mystics. And it's really helpful to do that. That mystics come in a kind of family group, a constellation, or that there's a kind of culture that is productive of a certain kind of mystical consciousness. So I was introduced to this idea in the Middle East when I was there studying, and the Islamic world talks about this in a little different way. It appears in our biblical text when Yeshua speaks of himself being a pathway that leads to truth and to life. I am the way, the truth, and the life, John 14:1. And I didn't really know what that meant until I went to the culture that actually created that terminology. Middle Eastern college creates language around spiritual thought, and one of the terms is this word, the way, or the pathway. But in the Middle East, it's a very specific idea. And in Arabic, the word is tariqa, and it means that someone has found a particular pathway that allows them to make forward progress. It doesn't mean just walking around. So Yeshua presents a pathway that is acceptable to a person and invites us onto that particular journey. And there's all kinds of benefits of taking this particular path. So that's called a tariqa. And when you go to the Middle East, one of the things that you begin to understand is that spirituality is offered in different pathways within the, for example, the Islamic world. So you have different tariqa, the plural form, and people find their way to different pathways. And these are usually generative of a particular, and then another word that's offered is chain of transmission. And again, in the Middle Eastern language, it's silsile, which is a chain that's connected. And so that's connected from the source of that pathway all the way to any disciple. So the transmission flows across the chain and arrives inside of your own soul. So mystical cultures are often thought of as chains of transmission, particular pathways that carry the charisms of the founders of that pathway, and you may be attracted by that. It's kind of like you may be attracted to the aroma of something, or to the flavor of something, or to the culture of something. So if you thought about the mystical traditions of this kind of consciousness across the Western Christian world, you could think about Russian mystics, German mystics, English mystics, French mystics, Spanish mystics, Italian mystics, and so forth. And these would be like climates or ecological zones. And you would flourish maybe in one and not feel as alive in another. And it wouldn't be your fault, and it wouldn't be the fault of the mystics. It would just simply be your own proclivity. And you might take a look at your own heritage, because it feels, epigenetics suggests that we carry the flavoring of our own ancestry, and maybe even greater than that, the history. So sometimes we are surprised that we're drawn to a particular thing, and it may have something to do with our need to live in an ecological zone, a spiritual zone, and that is going to benefit us in a particular way. When I was working in community mental health for 5 years in this county, in fact, when Jackie and I first arrived, I worked in community mental health. And one of the things I discovered was that as practitioners, each of the therapists might actually be using the same therapeutic modalities, but that when a person entered into our zone, our climate, some flourished and some did not. And if they changed the zone, they might discover that they were really enlivened by that. And it wasn't the fault of the modality, it had to do with the climate of the therapist. That the therapist was in fact a kind of zone, an ecological zone, in which some clients flourished and others did not. It's kind of a strange idea, but I saw it happen over and over again. So think of it that way, that Hildegard actually was in a family called the Rhineland mystics. And the Rhineland mystics were German, out of which Meister Eckhart comes, and many, many others. And that's one of the intriguing studies of mystical families and what that zone is like and the flavor of it and the ecology of it and what flourishes inside of it. And you could make the case that Hildegard of Bingen was an extraordinary zone of spiritual possibility. She actually created her own ecological zone. I mean, she was that powerful. And I would say what Rumi was to his world, he created something similar in his world. His ecological zone extends now into our century. And so does Hildegard's. And the more I am exposed to her, the more I realized I'm influenced by her. And I didn't know it. And I didn't realize how powerful her way of being was. So we're using her as an example, but she had the geography of Germany was influencing her. And Alice and I were talking about the Rhine Valley and the river and all of that. And it's a deeply forested place with, in the High Middle Ages, most of it was just forest. And then there were these communities and monasteries and a few cities. But she went way beyond her time. She was way beyond her time in the same way that Rumi was way beyond his time. Rumi had the capacity to speak to the future, and so did Hildegard of Bingen. In fact, she created the future. We're using today, we don't realize it, we're using today her discoveries. She was a creative genius, which means that she was permeable to cosmic consciousness. And when cosmic consciousness, she was so permeable that when it flowed through her avatar, it almost undid her. She makes the case that she was laid low by her own consciousness, that it would be so strong that this permeability of the cosmic force of consciousness that was coming through her as an avatar, it would almost lay her own physical body into a state of immobility. And she talks about that. And she talks about her own avatar, and we're using that word now, her own being resisting even. And then that would create a barrier inside of her, and she would need to release it. All kinds of interesting things. So you may be deeply attracted to her because she's a woman, and I think that's an evidence of the divine feminine, just completely full scale, 100% at work. She just opened the doors. And when she didn't open the doors, or when she was resistive, she had her own struggle with that. It affected her, and she talks about that. So she is an example of the divine feminine at work. We're going to see that. She's an example of a particular ecology, spiritual ecology, which is German. And whatever that means. And I was reflecting, I'm German too. And I wonder if some of that is because some of why I'm attracted to her way of being is that because of that epigenetics or that ancestry. I don't know, but I'm entertaining that idea, and I think you should think about it as well. But I've been attracted to other ecological zones, and I've learned to live in other spiritual ecologies that are very different from the German one. But you might explore that your own mystical consciousness may be benefited by a particular ecology. And you're a receptor of that flow from the cosmic state. So last night we looked at the, whoops, sorry, I went too fast. Okay, I need to share screen. That's the problem. Last night, we shared this image, which is in our sapiential tarot set, of this highest zone of consciousness, which is the sea, the ocean. You are the ocean and the ocean is you. That was chanted this morning. You are swimming in the level of consciousness number 6. When that starts to be channeled into you, when you're in a state of sovereign consciousness, then that particular channel of you opens up in a particular way into this ocean. So that's the theory that we're working off of. And I hope that begins to put your own life, perhaps, in a different context. So this is Hildegard. And a number of years ago, I had worked on a series of iconic images that I had done by watercolor, and I liked them, and
Lynn, you got muted.
Lynn, I think you've broken up. If you can hear us, turn your camera off.
then my electronic image that I made of her. And so the image to the right, lower right-hand corner, is a German nun, but she's a force of nature. She was absolutely a force of nature. And she practiced what maybe today we called the green movement, the greening, the wilding, the rewilding. I think she's the author of all of that. I think she is the source of everything I've just mentioned. The greening, the regreening.
Lynn, can you hear us?
And then she had at her heart this vision.
Lynn,
Yes.
you're breaking up. So could you turn your camera off?
Let me see if I can do that.
At the bottom left of your screen.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So I don't know if that helps. And then over here on the left is a kind of stained glass of one of her visions, which we're going to get to. So this is sort of a composite, and in the center is a vision she had of the cosmic egg or cosmic consciousness. So she had that vision, and it was quite extraordinary, and it was her way of beginning to let us know how deeply connected. And so I'm going to go off, and this will perhaps help in the presentation that you can hear me better. So just listen. You don't have to see my face as I'm talking. So let me give you some background to her and how extraordinary she was. And not to set her outside, but she was just totally permeable. Her being didn't block out the cosmic flow of consciousness. It just absorbed it. And when she didn't absorb it, or when she was blocking, her body would even let her know, which was interesting. Okay. She was born around 1098 and she died in 1179. So that's about 1,000 years ago. And she was in the High Middle Ages. And she was in a period of time when there was a lot of, the Roman Empire had collapsed, of course, and there was a lot of darkness in the European continent. The Middle East was the place of great civilization. Europe was not. Europe was trying to gain its feet again. So we were not the center of the universe at that point. She was the 10th and last child of her family. So imagine that. So a very precarious, if you're the last child in your family, you kind of know what that might be like. You're kind of the tail end of all things, and everybody else got the goodies, and you come last. In that world, they often, I don't know all the reasons why, but it was part of the culture. Some of the children would be sent and given to a monastic world to be trained. So I don't know about all her earlier siblings, but she was given at age 8 into the hands of a monastic world. And her mentor was about 6 years older than her. So she had a kind of older sister. Her name was Jutta. And so Jutta became her elder sister, mentor, a kind of sibling in the monastery that took care of her, took her under her wing, and actually taught her to read and write. And then she had a male mentor who was had a kind of position in the monastic world at that time. His name was Volmar. And Volmar was older, and he really oversaw the championing of the education of the women in the monasteries and so forth, and was very much had her back, let's say. And she confided in him he was a confessor, and she confided in him all of her doubts about her experience. And she had a lot of them because she was really permeable to consciousness, and it just was affecting her deeply. And so she would tell, and she didn't necessarily want to share with everyone what she was experiencing. But she was, in fact, a woman of great accomplishment, deep insight, amazing curiosity and accomplishment, unparalleled perhaps in her day. She studied everything. She studied everything. She was curious about everything. Any door that opened up, she jumped into. She was a writer. She wrote many texts. She was a philosopher. She wrote treatises of philosophy. She was a composer of music. We listened to her music. Some this morning is a very unusual form of music. She was a naturalist. She wrote texts on nature, on medicinal plants. She developed whole realms of medicine. She was an artist. She used the pigments that she had to illustrate her visions. She created the idea of visio divina. I realized, oh my God, that whole idea of creating images and using images in a midrashic way, she was, in our culture, in our Christian culture, the one who championed that, and she almost invented it by herself. So she started creating images of her visions, which we're going to talk about in a moment. She founded whole areas of science. She was the first naturalist that we know. So when you go out into the natural world and you pick a plant and you want to find out what it can do and what family, she was doing that. She was walking out into the natural world and doing it. She was an herbalist. She was a theologian. She was made a doctor of theology in the Catholic Church, even in her day. She wrote texts on botanicals, on medicine. She created liturgical dramas. There's hardly anything that you can talk about that she didn't try. And she actually, believe it or not, created a new language with a new alphabet. I mean, I don't know why exactly, but for some reason she thought that was important and she did it. So in the meantime, in her spare time, she built 2 monasteries. So she actually founded 2 monasteries. And when Jutta, who became the abbess of the monastery where she was, when Jutta died, she became the prioress, the abbess. And then she was in touch with a lot of different political folk and theological folk during her time. I'm going to show my face just a minute. And she actually went out and physically founded 2 monasteries. She wasn't, so it's an extraordinary kind of experience that she had. Now, the question is, why? Why would this woman, who was ordinary, in an extraordinary way? I mean, the 10th child, who was given at age 8 to a monastery to be educated and so forth. Why would that, what would happen? Why was that happening? And she gives it a Latin name. I'll give it to you in Latin. She says it's because of umbra viventis lucis. That's the Latin name for what she called the reflection of the living light that was inside of her. Now, I think she's exactly saying what Deepak Chopra talked about last night, that she was actually in her being allowing that sea that was inside of her to have full expression. She wasn't blocking it. And when she did, she became sick. Here's what she says. This is her description of umbra viventis lucis, which is the reflection of living light. She says this, quote, "From my early childhood, before my bones, my nerves, and my veins were fully strengthened as a child, I've always seen this vision in my soul. Even to the present time, when I am now more than 70 years old, in this vision, my soul, as God would have it, rises up high into the vault of the heavens and into the changing sky and spreads out among different peoples." So she feels this light above her, behind her, spreading out, and she can see it spreading out to different people, although they are far away from me in distant lands and places. And because I see them in this way, I see them in my soul, I observe them according to the shifting of clouds and other creating things. So she's seeing it within the natural order. She's seeing it in people. She's this light is flowing out of her, and I do not hear them with my outer ears, nor do I perceive them with my thoughts, but any combination of my five senses, but this is in my soul. While my outer eyes are open, I'm seeing this in my soul. So I have never fallen prey to ecstasy in the visions, but I have seen them when I'm wide awake day and night. So she's an ecstatic, but she's an ecstatic, or she's seeing in a normal, sort of ordinary way. And yet it's flowing out through her. And I'm constantly fettered by sickness, she says, and often in the grip of pain so intense that it threatens to kill me. But God has sustained me until now. Thus is not spatial. It's far brighter than a cloud that carries the sun. I can measure neither height nor depth nor breadth in it, and I call it, and then she gives it the term, umbras vivintas lucis, the reflection of living light. And as the sun and the moon and the stars appear in the water, so this light appears in my writings, my sermons, my virtues, and my activities, which take form inside of me and which shine out. That's her description. So she says, from a very, very early age, this was what I was experiencing. And I simply didn't know it. I didn't know what to say about it. I didn't know how to handle it. So then she would talk to Jutta and she would talk to Volmar about this experience of consciousness that she was having. I think we all have this in some form. I don't think this is unique to her. I don't think we can name it. I don't think it's easy for us to talk about it, but I think we have it. And she said, here's something else she said. This is another of her quotes. But though I saw and heard these things, often I would refuse to write for a long time because of my own doubts and bad opinions of myself and because of the problem of human words. This was not stubbornness in me, but it was an exercise of humility until I was laid low by God and I fell upon a bed. And then I was compelled by my illness to become a maiden of good conduct. And a certain confessor, who is Richardus von Stade, said to her secretly, you must allow, and I would, of this to come forward, and I would set my hand to writing what I saw. And while I was doing it, I sensed, as I mentioned before, the deep profundity of this exposition. And I would work and I would speak. And this would come through not the invention of my own mind, but it would come through as the secret mysteries that God was speaking to me. And I heard a voice saying to me, cry out, therefore, write this. And so she did, and she would do it. So you can see that she felt vulnerable and she had great struggle. And she needed to allow this to come forward through practical vision, through being led into all of these fields of endeavor where her generosity and her curiosity led her. So she was an ordinary woman with this extraordinary capacity to let this light shine through her. And this, I would say, the flow of the ocean of consciousness that we're beginning to think about in that particular way. So I'm going to go back and show you some of her visio divinas. So once, I've been experimenting it, I realize all my life with this same idea. Let me do this. I'll give you this little tidbit of my own experience. I have been really frustrated for years by working with Middle Eastern texts that are full of images, but they're described in linear thought and by words. And I kept coming up against the sense it needs to be a visio. It needs to be an image that's seen, or we won't get it. And it was not until I met Miss Allison that I was introduced to a way through her work to how to do this. So Allison was already down the road experimenting with Visio Divina. And then we started working on that, and Allison mentored me in this way. And then once I found how to turn to Visio Divina as a mode of description, I felt satisfied that, oh, okay, this is the way. This is one of the ways that we can actually enter into understanding beyond the linear progression of words, which is the way Yeshua taught. He actually taught with visual images, but he used parable as his particular modality. So I think this is exactly what happened to Hildegard. She had to make her visions a visual reality, and she was kind of forced to it. So I want to show you just 5 images. And I'm still struck the first time I saw them, I was really struck. And I thought, wow, these are amazing images. And I'm like any artist, you have to sort of enter into their world. Okay. So let me show you some. So this is the image I made of her, but here is her image of her. She actually, in the 1100s, early 1100s, she painted this. This is her icon of herself. And notice what's happening. Notice this. This is her sense of what's streaming into her. And notice that she's in an enclosed space, a monastic space, and maybe she's saying that she's even in a deeper space of inner seeing. And the visions are flowing into her, and she is then transcribing them and painting them. So this is her own painting, her own icon of herself painting or writing what is happening. And here is a monk who is kind of half in her world, or at least observing and yet outside. So this may be Volmar that she was talking about, who really championed and encouraged her. And he's inside the monastic frame, but she's explaining this umbra viventis lucis that she's experiencing, this reflection of living light that she's undergoing. And here is, and I've been looking at this, and I tried to go find an interpretation. So I'm interpreting it myself. I'm not sure that my interpretation is entirely correct. But this is her, I would say, metaphysics, or metaphysical vision. So I think, as I'm looking at this, this middle is the flow of life. The flow, the horizontal axis flowing with all of its domains and humans inside of that flow. And there it is, but that comes from this great source. And we're going to have a vision of that source in a little bit. And here is a human moving outside and smelling the fragrance of this source. And here I think is Yeshua as the teacher that's enlivening this flow of life. So here is a vision she has of 3 domains, and she's seeing sort of what's going on and how we move in and out of these domains. And Yeshua brings to the world a particular pathway. And you can see the same light that was flowing into her consciousness is flowing out of his into the world. Okay, this is my interpretation. I may be damn wrong, but at least that's the way I see it at the moment. And I think it's an extraordinary vision. And she's trying desperately to do what Allison and I do when we're working with images. She's trying to capture a huge amount of information. And she's experimenting with Visio Divina, and she actually used these as midrash. So it's so interesting. Here is another one. And this one I think I've seen an interpretation. Here she is doing her work over in the lower left-hand corner, but she's having a vision of the various states of humankind and probably the higher self. And the higher self may be represented by this figure, and that figure belongs to the cosmic being of what we call the son of humanity, the anthropos. And you can see a face in this holding all of the forms of humankind, and you being there in the middle of it. And then above that is the Pantocrator. So you have sort of 3 levels of human being and consciousness. So she sees that. She's really perceiving a kind of sacred anthropology. And then you have all these forces and figures and animals and all kinds of things affecting us as we live inside of the human world, but we're growing into our own fullness, which is held by the great collective of the anthropos, which is the gift of the Logos, the Pantocrator, something like that. And now she talks about, which you have some of the same figures, you have some of the same images of this larger being. Here she is seeing and seeking to capture it, but she has the 4 quadrants of human experience. The ones that we talk about when we talk about the 4 quadrants of our own journey. And she's seeing these as the seasons of our own lives. So she's realizing, oh, wow, when we journey, we're actually journeying through the 4 seasons. And this is a kind of greening process, a process that is taking us into a particular kind of space and a particular kind of maturation. and we're being influenced and affected by lots of things, but we're held within a much larger living, which she showed as this form of humankind on the outside. So it's an amazing, and I get it. And I think we're actually using this analog in our own work. And she saw it in the High Middle Ages. She said, oh, this is what, and this came to her as a vision. This was wisdom herself teaching her. And she sees it in almost exactly the same way we see it. And then she has this sense of us being in cosmic consciousness. I think this is her way of talking about what Deepak Chopra was talking about. And you have the great cosmic energies, and then you have the universe in which those cosmic energies are flowing and represented, and then you have your own inner world, and you have this coming into your own inner world, something like that. There's a book written in our by Chilton Pierce, I think, The Crack in the Cosmic Egg. I think this is like that idea, very much like what Deepak Chopra is talking about. And I had one more, and it's not in my series, I'm sorry. It was of a vision of all the angels in concert, and I somehow have missed it. I thought I put it in the series, but I didn't. That's Hildegard. And just for a few minutes before I send you out to do some work, any questions that you might have based on this just general introduction? You can find this general and wonderful introduction in many places, but if you're really interested in following her career and her work, Matthew Fox has done a great work in his Creation Spirituality of collecting her tradition and making it available in some very readable texts. So I would recommend you to him and as an interpreter. And there's a wonderful book called Sisters of Wisdom about her work that is a little more academic, but it's excellent. Any comment or question just on this general quick introduction to her?
Faye has her hand up.
Hey, I see it. You're muted, Faye.
Yeah, I was trying to unmute myself in the wrong spot. Did I hear you say that she was in a great amount of pain and then had an affliction? And did I also hear you say that she felt that it was because of her resistance to what was coming through her?
Yeah, she felt that.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's a misinterpretation or not. I mean, she could certainly misinterpret some of that and think that it was an affliction brought by the divine until she kind of released herself. I don't know, but I'm just going to let her speak for herself.
Because I thought I heard you say like she was in such excruciating pain.
From time to time, she would
From
be.
time to time. Okay, so it wasn't
Not
something
always.
she lived
No.
with continually.
No, I don't.
Okay, I didn't know if I heard that right, so I was curious if you knew what she had other than just that. Did she describe it ever as emotional pain or physical pain?
I don't think I can say I have an answer to that.
Okay.
She definitely, it was certainly physical, and she
Okay.
felt it physically, but I wouldn't doubt that she was, I don't know. Was she bipolar? I don't know.
Would you liken it to, say, for example, somebody has, this is a thought that just kind of popped in, a thought about, like, say if somebody has an affliction, say a disease or something comes like say a flu, and that as you're processing or laying low, that when somebody's sick, that then they allow and open up to uh, let that go. It's just something that moves through you.
Yeah, I think we have to take that into consideration. If we used the idea that Deepak Chopra, our avatar is very limited, and it can. My little grandson plays with avatars, and I've sat and watched him and had him explain what he was doing. It's Fortnite, I think, is the big program that he uses, and so he will create an avatar, and he will it will be limited until it gains strength, and then he'll keep adding qualities to his avatar until it's stronger and stronger and stronger. I'm not sure that that's not exactly what's happening to us. So an avatar has more opportunity later to do things that it does earlier until it's gained strength. Todd.
So we have a daughter-in-law who sings her music. So we've been able to listen to her sing. But I think I've read about her that she was in addition to all this creativity, she had certain institutional battles going on with the male Catholic hierarchy. And even though some would listen to her sermons, they would, I guess, in various ways restrict her. So is that correct? She was having to live an institutional life at the same time that she was founding and creating and composing.
I'm going to click off my video so I can hear a little bit better. Todd, I think you're right. I think there's not an age in which there's not conflict of this sort. You could make the case positively that it was because of the monastic world that she really could express herself. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to. But then, and often they really championed her, and they had her back. And in fact, they made her a doctor of theology, which is extraordinary.
Yes, yes.
And so, but there were, I read one little something this morning about she had a fight with some priests who somebody had died, and the priests, and was put in the Christian cemetery, and the priests around that area said, oh, we ought to exhume his body and put it somewhere else because he died out of communication with the Catholic Church. And she said, hell no, you're not touching that body. And she just went to bat for that, that corpse that was laying in the cemetery. And she said, you're just idiots to try to dig him up. And it's over my dead body, you'll do it. So that was sort of her, her fiery nature when she felt something was wrong. So
maybe she's Nancy Pelosi's model.
Yeah, you got a good point there. Okay, Anna.
So as I was listening to you, Lynn, I kept thinking of Joan of Arc.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about, that she would hear the voices, and, they couldn't believe that this, 16-year-old woman, for heaven's sakes, she was like an avatar to me.
Yeah.
When I think about Joan of Arc and what she was able to do with incredible strength that was poured into her from divine consciousness. Or, she heard voices. She had a conversation with God all the time, just.
Yeah. And I think what we're just seeing is that humans have this capacity.
Yes.
if we'll just let it open. It's not that it's, something we got to work our tail off. No, it's the opening to it. It's the inner opening that is the possibility. And we do have that possibility. And women maybe have it in greater, males may shut it down more quickly.
Yeah,
And so,
Teresa Avila is another one that comes to my mind.
exactly. So if you go look at the women mystics, they are just very, very capable in a way that sometimes the male mystics are not. I don't, this is maybe too 21st century gender stuff, but at any rate.
I just wanted to say, Lynn, that there is a movie about Hildegard of Bingen that I stumbled on. I'm not sure which, it was either Amazon or Prime, most likely, or maybe it's YouTube, I don't know. But it's a movie about her challenge, the story of the person who died without the last sacraments or whatever it was, and it's really quite fascinating. So just for those of you who want to watch a movie, there's one out there. It's kind of low, it's not fancy quality production. So
Good. Gwen.
Um, maybe later. In fact, I'm sure you're going to do this, but I don't want to lose this part. When you were talking about it's the opening versus the working of our tails off, and that just really made me think of what's going on today. And will you help me? Will you talk about that a little bit as far as what's needed today for us to be opening versus, I don't know, I guess I'm thinking of the political systems everywhere, all over the world. What does that mean? What does that look like?
Well, it is the perennial question. Is humans have this? They're built for this capacity, and if you take the 6 levels of consciousness as an example of the way we kind of move through it, I think the first level is child consciousness, which is open. And then what happens as the child grows older, the child has to create a kind of avatar, protective avatar. And that gets a pretty hard shell. And then it gets really challenged during adolescence into cultural activity and then into adulthood. And so then we spend the rest of our time making that more permeable. And but my basic understanding at this point is that we're stuck, and humankind right now is stuck in America in particular for a lot of different historical reasons, and we're really, really stuck. And if we don't unstick and if there's not more and more permeability to cosmic consciousness, we're going to kill ourselves. And it looks like we're quickly headed in that direction. So artists, mystics, composers, human beings on Beaver Island, in Ann Arbor, Michigan, in Texas, ordinary people, Colorado, Arizona. I mean, we see ourselves as ordinary and we think, oh, well, this can never be manifested in us. Yet notice one little girl who just allows herself to be open and follow her curiosity and allows the light to shine through it. Notice what happens. She becomes a creative genius. Is it because she's special? I don't think so. I think she handled consciousness in a different way. And her avatar, for whatever reason, was very permeable. Okay, I'm going to stop this because I want you to work, and I'm going to show this, and you know it, and you've received it, and hopefully you have printed it off, which is has two of her quotes. If you have the color vision, that's my visio divina of what these quotes are of commentary
Then
after it. And then
then turn your camera off.
okay. I write a commentary about this based on what I think she's trying to convey that we now have discovered about wisdom herself. So this is my attempt to open up the conversation based on Margaret Barker, based on the work that we've been doing in the the luminous gospels, based on other texts in the early tradition about wisdom being chased out of human society by the dragon of human society, so forth and so on. So we are the place, the site where this gets to come back in. And then I have two questions, 8 and 9, at the end of that essay that I'd like for you to reflect on. So sit with this, reflect on Hildegard's vision that is presented at the beginning, read through the essay about this, reflect on that, and then answer the questions 8 and 9. I've just kind of given you a list of things that I was considering when I was writing this, but think about 8 and 9 as your openness to this extraordinary way of taking divine feminine in. That's what this essay is about, and which she did. So for the next hour, I would like you to work on that first. And then if you have time, I would like for you to look at the Simone Weil YouTube. Simone Weil is a similar being to Hildegard, and she's a modern woman. She was French rather than German, but in European context, there was a lot going on between France and Germany, and she wrote this, she spoke about this kind of consciousness. So listen to her, and anything that comes out of that, yes.
I think it may be slightly complicated for them to stay on Zoom and listen to that. Why don't we play it? I can play it.
Well, what I thought was we'd go off of Zoom and come back on in an hour.
Okay, you want them, so you should have all received that link in the email that I sent out, or Sally sent out on Friday, what has the link to that video. So so people are going to leave the room,
Yes.
and then you're going to come back in.
We're going to come back in an hour, and that would be 15 minutes after the hour of whatever is now for you. So we're almost at 15 minutes after. So you have an hour to, work, think, reflect, write, and then at 50 minutes after the hour, we'll all come back in, and we'll be sent into small groups to share what we have found. Someone step into the space.
Well, this is not about what we discussed in our small group, but it was very cool while we were spending our time in our own reflection. I put Hildegard's chants on in the background, and that's what we were reflecting with. It was quite lovely to be in her aura.
Mhm.
What else? Dorothy?
And then Leslie.
Okay.
Just at the end of our really rich sharing, Todd asked who are contemporary figures that inspire us. And it's interesting, two that came up were very young with a lot of fiery energy, Malala and Greta Thunberg. And then one quite older was Nancy Pelosi. But it's lovely to see that chain of transmission in a sense. I mean, I know it's not necessarily mystical, but the life force expressing in such dynamic ways. Anyway.
Yeah, a couple of us were talking about how difficult it was to come to the divine feminine from a patriarchal upbringing and religious background, but that there seems to be such a draw about it. It's like the ocean we swim in. It's the nature all around us. It's the nurturing. It's if the heart opens, it's right there. But it's near and yet so far sometimes. Thank you.
Thank you. This is your time to cross-pollinate the field.
Todd wants to speak.
Todd.
You're on.
Okay. No, okay. I'm looking at him. Okay. Okay. You see.
You're on.
Okay. We do, like all of you, I guess, charitable giving. But what's interesting to me is that at the head of CARE and Oxfam America, and I think maybe, I'm not sure, Amnesty International, but at, the one I know the closest is Abby Maxman, who is the head of Oxfam America, and she's relatively young. And she is like enormously talented and has seemed endless energy. And she's switching from administering a worldwide organization that provides resources to people who are suffering, and then also lobbies for change. And then she can ask for money just like that. She just go between administering, serving, requesting, and I just think, I don't know many men that can do that so smoothly and so effortlessly, and it's I'm always impressed by, and then she seems genuine, I mean, when you're talking to a fundraiser, at some point you're going to get, would you consider, but she just makes it natural. And I think that's such a gift and such a talent. And I think it's partly the feminine gift, more so than the masculine gift.
Oh, what else? Oh, Leah.
One of the times I experienced the gravitational pull um, upward was when I felt absolutely compelled to go to this workshop called Circle of Stones with Judith Dirk, where we were invited to sit in silence for a week and learn to listen to the divine feminine. And at the time, I didn't like women, and the other time, I didn't like sitting in silence, and I had no idea why I would go to that, and yet I could not go. And it was one of those times when I felt like I was pulled kicking and screaming to the very place I needed to be, and and I'll be forever grateful for that. It's part of that mystery, though. Of it was a real hard pull against gravity.
Leah. Hey.
This is not what came out in our group, but when Lynn asked the question, like, well, how was I affected by Hildegard? For one, I'd never heard of her before, seriously. And when Lynn began to describe something about her life, I'm actually very shocked, really shocked that I'd never heard of her. At the same time, it's almost as if she's a wayshore for me in regards of the explanation as to how she just kept opening and opening and opening to what source was shoving at her, so to speak. And also to consider the time that she lived in, that it was against all odds. And so I feel, and I'm having a lot of emotion about this as it's coming through to say, overwhelmed at the state of our world at the present time, and don't know what to do about it. And yet to hear about Hildegard, that she just kept opening and opening and opening to what was in front of her. Thank you.
Thank you, Faye. Well, I can play some music if there's nothing more. But I'm suspicious that there's. All right.
Anna has her hand up.
Okay, good.
I have a question, and is there any way that we can get a transcription of Simone Weil's words in this particular Spotify, or is there a book, or is there a place where that came from?
I think you'll have to search that one out on Google.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, just let me know if you can hear this, because I'm on Spotify and I don't think they're that friendly with Zoom. So let's see if this works. Let me turn.
Devlin has something to say.
Devlin, where are you, Devlin?
Here. I just, in response, I thought I would transcribe. I don't think it would be hard to transcribe the video, and so I'll be glad to make that available to other people.
Great. Bless you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Devlin.
All right. A little bit of Hildegard before we go for lunch. Where are you? That's the one. something a little. I'm going to do something a little different at the moment. I'm going to show you 18 of Hildegard's icons, her images, her paintings. And they're going to flow by at a rate at over about 6 minutes with some music. It's unfortunately not Hildegard's music because Apple's a little territorial about how you can create a slideshow with music. I don't understand why, but anyway, that's Apple, the Apple world for you. And so you're going to watch that, and rather than going out, you know, and trying to grab them because they're going to come by, too many of them, it's more like letting them come to you, letting them come in and touch you. And at the end of that, you're going to go into about 25 minutes of drawing. It could be a mandala, it might not be, it might be something completely different, whatever it is that seems to want to come forward. If there's no drawing that wants to come, you can also write like we did last time. You can write some poetry or some words that capture what it's like to swim in her world of icons. It's kind of like swimming in her imaginal world and letting them come to you and touch you rather than you, I don't know, figuring out what you're going to draw. Just relax and let this wash over you. So I'm just going to set this up. Okay. And let's go full screen. All right.
We are not seeing your screen, Allison.
Okay. That's because I have to share. Here we go. All right, share screen. There we go. You should see them now, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll be back at about 20 to the hour. If you would turn your cameras off, that would give you more privacy. Sam, start with you, Sam. And if you want to show the image, you've got to show it to the top of your screen where the little green light is on, which is where your camera is. You need to unmute yourself, Sam.
Wow, beautiful.
Bring it closer. Can you say a few words?
Well,
Sounds like-
it was kind of a childish response. It was very much a showing off my colors, and then the tree of the world tree came into my mind, and that's what I started working on. And I tried to get some stars in there to the night sky, but they're sort of in the wrong place. And you know, but like I said, it was a very, very childish response to the task.
Great.
And just my personal opinion, crayons suck. But anyway.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
How about you, Sally?
I didn't get as far as he did because I started with pencil. So I don't know if you can see.
Oh, yes.
So the heart in the center is being held by the hands here. The wings around the heart in the center. These are waves as a symbol of hope. These are hand clasps, hands clasping hands, all with the fire around. So it's rather intricate, but when I was watching the images come up, it just washed with me with just kind of a sense of hope and what's necessary to carry on. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Devlin, you want to pass? Are you sure? Okay. Amelia.
So, what this is trickles of water flowing from one leaf to another, just cascading down. And there are flowers in amongst them.
Nice.
And Marianne, you're not visible. Are you there? Well, we'll come back to you. Lynn, do you want to show us something? You're muted.
I'm trying to send an image out. I'm having trouble. So come back and I'll show.
Okay. And Dorothy.
Well, mine is unfinished, which is probably a good metaphor for my life, I hope. And I don't know if you can see it. Down here is me in the corner drawing on my kitchen table. And there is the force of light and waves and water. And then the unfolding life in the heart, which has a lot of red energy at the nexus of the horizontal and the vertical. And this was all that comes before in the human world. This was going to be the natural world, but then there's to be discovered. This is the big not knowing. This is the the path forward, or the unfinished picture, as it were. Okay.
Todd, do you want to say anything?
Well, yes, having failed all of my life to draw, I decided to write something, but I decided I would write a sonnet. But I didn't accomplish it in 20 minutes, but I did get the rhyming A, B of the first stanza or whatever it's called. It's going to be, the rhymes are going to be write, hold, sight, and unfold.
read what you have.
Well, I haven't finished.
Well, that's okay.
No.
I'm sure by unfinished.
Well,
Please read it.
I'll read you the first line, okay?
Okay.
Before she could pick up a pen to write. I haven't.
Her gift of selection must.
You see what I have?
Something to hold. To that, well, I can't read his writing, so that's.
Anyway, no, but I can't draw. But I was thinking that I was realizing how hard it is to write a sonnet, So, but it's because you have a general idea, then you make it more specific as you go along. But I'll keep working on it and show it to you our next meeting. Thank you.
Anne, please unmute yourself.
I had to pull myself together. So, not being daunted by the fact that I had no artistic talent, I went ahead anyway. But while I was watching those images, this poem by E.E. Cummings came to mind. And so I'm going to read it to you all because I spent a little bit of time writing it out. So I don't know whether you all know E. Cummings. He's famous for not using any kind of punctuation and writing in lowercase. But I love this poem. And it says, I thank you, God, for this amazing day, for the leaping greenly spirits of trees and the blue true dream of sky, and for everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes. And I think that might be a modern poem from Hildegard. But okay, so here is my drawing. And so this little squidget it right in the middle are supposed to be praying hands. And so it signifies humility, and the fire of passion is coming to that. But around that, so I was fascinated by what Hildegard said about evil, that wisdom didn't create evil, but it allowed it to happen. Do you remember that? It was one of the things. So I put evil in with all of the things of nature. And what I was particularly interested in, and what she was talking about, was the natural progression of things. So if you could see this tacular drawing, you can see that the leaves are bare and then they come to fruition and then they become bare again. And the same thing with the stars that are in this outer circle, the moon and the stars. So the moon goes through its natural cycles. And then I loved her image of this being with its arms around the whole mandala. So with apologies to those of you all who have artistic ability, thank you.
Thank you. Peg.
I'll pass. I have no artistic ability.
Okay. Leah.
Okay. I have all the darkness of the Crusades all around, but because Hildegard is receiving a transmission of fire, and also her heart is lit, she is repelling the forces of darkness, and green things grow and the rivers flow. And I think that's the power of her vision. And it's my inspiration, because her dark times were not any darker than ours. I would say that.
John, would you unmute?
My artistic ability is 0 too. No, can you see?
Oh yeah.
It's a rather a dreadful diagram. You've got the 3 flames on each side coming down, the fire of God's love. The red triangles are the security of God's love, which supports anything. The tiny red letters in the middle, alpha, omega, omega and alpha, the first and the last letters in the Greek alphabet. This reminds us of God's totally all-encompassing nature. The blue receptacles of water, I really had to put those in because all this fire, even though it comes from God, I think it needs diluting with water, because otherwise we'd simply get shriveled by God's fiery presence. The blue arrow indicates the importance of relationships between two people, and the big X's are not X's at all. They are the archaic Hebrew alphabet, the last letter tau, and that has the same sort of effect as the Greek alpha and omega, only they tended to use just the last letter tau. And that reminds us that God is not only with us generally, but also as individual instances and manifestations. Thank you for putting up with this.
Oh, nonsense, John. It's perfect.
Nonsense, did you say? Yes, it
I
was.
said nonsense. Don't disparage yourself so quickly. Eleanor.
I'm sorry, I'm afraid I'm going to have to pass. I decided to sit with the blankness of not knowing how to respond.
Good, good. That's respecting where you are. Herman, are you there? Maybe not. All right, Susan. You need to unmute.
I don't know how well you can see it in pencil, but within the flaming wings of the sacred feminine and divine are, and within the sphere of time and space that we're in, is the held the third eye, the heart, and the belly, the space. There is the rootedness of the earth and the fire of the magma coming up, and you can't see the yellow and the blue that is coming down from the sky. And linking across these are a yellow for the light and blue. Those are two colors for kind of the, the cosmic womb. Is my my avatar soul vines that runs through, and I receive the transmissions through those different inner portals.
Thank you. Nancy.
I was really taken with the image of the scarab. So this is my version of the scarab, and I'm not quite sure what to make of it. I don't. There's sacred significance to scarabs in Egyptian goddess myths, and I don't remember clearly what it is right now, but that will be an ongoing inquiry.
And Sue?
Something dropped.
My pen is right there by your. Thank you.
Is Sue there? No. Yes?
No, she's not.
Okay. Leslie.
Indeedy. So, acrylic or digital art would have been much better for this. But this is infinity. There's me in the corner being Hildegard, contemplating infinity. And the spiral, I guess, is infinity goes on and on and on and on until you can't see anymore. And I also have a little bit of infinity where I'm drawing the same thing that I'm looking at. So within the picture, there's the picture, and within that picture is a picture, and that goes on for infinity. So yeah, that's
Thank
it.
you. Faye, please unmute.
As I was looking at the pictures as they were scrolling by, I thought about what are the things that kind of captured me and what did I think about them. And so this picture represents that. And this is the fact that the page couldn't contain it all. And so that's why the circle goes off of it. And I was kind of captured by the little houses that she had that were drawn in many of the last pictures. And they were kind of similar but different. And so that evoked in me Rumi's poem about the guest house. So they represent the individualization of people that are different yet the same. And then the moon and the sun are there as one that I had seen that icon representing the day and the night and the energy of the sun and the reflection of the moon. And the arrow in the center is the connection and the focus to be with the vertical. And then at the very bottom is the picture of me from behind, kind of taking it all in, and the recognition that I am all a part of it. And the blue squiggles represent the water, and I connected it with all of the images in this picture. And then I drew the four elements and represented by like a little animal and a fish to represent water and a crystal to represent the earth energy. And lightly, then there were stars around the outside to include that the earth is part of the universe. And I had an experience with somebody that was transitioning, that the portal was open and I got a little glimpse, and I used a gold pencil that is flowing through everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa.
Well, I didn't think I could draw something on the spot, so I wrote a few words. How do I enter in, find the way into the circle? Do I hold it or does it hold me? Wings spread, scales shimmer, flames dance, trees shelter, animals offer sustaining breath. Water flows, seasons change. Love weaves its way in and through all. Love soars from above, love rises from the depths. The depths are almost unfathomable. This is a strange and wonderful world. Do I hold it or does it hold me?
Thank you, Lisa. And Anna, please unmute.
So, having grown up left-handed, art was like the thing I dreaded the most growing up. So drawing was often very painful, but I tried anyway. So, okay. So that is the love of Christ on the cross that spreads to the love that grows into the love that flows down, that has wings to take us to the wonder of every moment through the depths of the sea and the clouds in the sky. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I was basically breaking up with Spotify. That's what I was doing during this exercise. It's like I was breaking up with Spotify. But anyway, in the midst of all of that, I drew a sense of the greening coming down in a world that we live in of jagged edges and nastiness, and it still comes down. And Lynn, do you want to share yours?
Make me co-host if you would.
Yep, there you go.
I did a digital art, and I was very interested in the cosmic egg idea that she had, and I put that within the context of the greening of the cosmos. And here we each are in our small boat as we navigate both the world and the greening and the cosmic egg. So that's what I did.
It's beautiful, Lynn. If you ever want to learn how to do that, you just go to Pixelmator.
Yep.
And you can become as proficient as Lynn. So it's our evening break. We'll come back in 2 hours. And I look forward to seeing you all. Take a good rest your eyes, get some food, walk about. See you soon. Take care. I'll ring the bell.
You want to ring the bell now?
I'm going to ring it now.
Okay, and then I'll start.
And you're going to share.
Sophia, you of the whirling wings, circling, encompassing energy of God, you quicken the world in your clasp. One wing soars in heaven. One wing sweeps the earth. The third flies all around us. Praise to Sophia. Let all the earth praise her. O greening branch, you stand in your nobility. Like the rising dawn, rejoice now and exult, and deign to free the fools we are from our long slavery to evil, and hold out your hand. The first image of Sophia in the universe. The second, the earth in that universe. 3 wings. Wings in the heavens, wings on the earth, wings around us. Sophia on the earth. Sophia in the greening. Sophia in the dawning. And Sophia holding all in her embrace. Sophia, you of the whirling wings, circling, encompassing energy of God. You quicken the world in your clasp. One wing soars in heaven, one wing sweeps the earth, and the third flies all around us. Praise to Sophia. Let all the earth praise her. O greening branch, you stand in your nobility. You stand in your nobility like the rising dawn, rejoicing now and exult and aim to free the fools we are for our long slavery to evil, and hold out your hand.
Raise us up.
Oh, I'm sorry, that was covered up in my. And the last line is what?
And hold out your hand to raise us up.
Oh, I'm so sorry, because it was covered up with one of the banners.
Okay. All right. So let's begin. Anna,
Let me
are you?
show them again.
Yes.
Sophia in the universe, the earth in the universe, the wings in the heaven, three winging pictures, the wings sweeping the earth, the wings flying around us. Sophia in the earth, Sophia in the greening, Sophia in the dawn, and then lifting us and raising us up out of the clasp of evil.
Okay, Anna. You're muted. Here we go.
I have to say, I am filled with as profound a love as I think I ever have felt. Thank you.
Thank you, Devlin. Isn't it extraordinary that she speaks across 1,000 years in our time?
So don't stop singing.
Yes.
What?
So don't stop singing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the Holy Spirit is a salve, like a salve for our soul. That was just
Harp and the lyre of God's kindness.
The song of rejoicing softens hard hearts. Singing summons the Holy Spirit. I love that.
Be brave and strong, even on a shipwreck of a world.
The path is not long, but the way is deep. You must be prepared to leap.
God
Dare
embrace.
to declare who you are.
I love that.
God embraces the universe.
Dare to. As the mystery of God hugs you in its all-encompassing arms.
All creatures are the glittering mirror of divinity. We will send you that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
because I think it's something that actually you want to spend some time with.
Yes, thank you.
I feel like Hildegard is amongst us, singing with us.
Awakening our hearts from their ancient sleep.
Yes, exactly. Are there more words here? You've held up very well. It's a big stretch that we've been on for many hours. This is probably the third or fourth wind. Lynn, are there any words you want to say?
She has given the king on high her kiss of peace.
Absolutely. Just imagine if this was in the school curriculum. Sunday school. Okay, I'm going to play a piece of music to end the evening, to end our gathering. Next time, which is, I believe, the weekend of the 3rd of December, it's the weekend after Thanksgiving, we will be meeting to explore Meister Eckhart, another of the Rhineland mystics, and hope to see many of you. Any other questions about what's next, or thanks to Sam for recording and for sending things out? All right.
Allison,
Sorry, Hildegard was, I'm sorry. Hildegard was also a interested in nutrition. And if you Google, you'll find her recipe for spelt bread and the most delicious fennel soup I've ever eaten. Delicious.
Really? Wow. Gwen, did you want to say something?
I was just curious if the next Philip is coming up. I'm getting everything sort of confused.
Next Thursday on, I think it's the 6th of no, it's the 3rd of November.
3rd of November. Okay.
It's next Thursday. This coming Thursday. This coming Thursday.
Okay, this coming Thursday.
Yeah, that's when we'll be meeting.
What is happening on November 3rd?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't get that. What was happening on November 3rd?
Oh, Gospel of Philip.
Oh, Gospel of Philip. Okay.